I'm
Okay.
not going to start the AI companion.
No, you don't need the end.
Good.
Okay. So
Hmm.
I'll start by welcoming Chaviva Shefer, our guest speaker. So I'll first start by saying thank you so much for coming this evening and for giving this talk. Um, Anybody who's in this room right now is obviously concerned, and there are more people that are not here now that are hopefully going to listen to this recording that wanted to be here but for whatever reason couldn't this evening. There are so many people that are interested right now in what's going on in Yerushalayim around the building of high-rise buildings, towers, however we want to call them, and how it's changing the face of our city and all those many implications. So we couldn't pick a better friend to the organization than Chaviva, who is really expert in this and many other things. So I don't need to say more than that. Thank you, Chaviva. The floor is yours. If you want to share a screen, just let us know.
Share screen,
I've
please.
given permission to share screen.
Thank you. Okay. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, here.
We can't see her.
Okay, you can't see me anymore?
No, you're
No.
not
Wait,
on.
let me get back to the beginning. And yeah, and that's about equal feet. Okay. Okay, can you see? Right.
We can see your screen, but we can't see you.
Can't see you. I wonder what happened to me.
You have disappeared.
All right, wait a minute. So let me stop the screen share a minute. I'll stop the screen share and try and see what the problem is.
Chaviva, you have to go into more and then you
Oh, I
can
switched it. I see what happened. Okay, I saw what happened.
and also
There, now you're back.
you have to put your matzeget onto show slideshow or
Oh,
something.
on me, on my screen, it's showing the slideshow, and I wonder why it isn't on yours. I used to lecture, and I used to do this in my sleep, but
You mean you want to show a full screen?
yes, I want to show.
It's very easy.
Here, I've got it.
You share your matzeget.
I know, I've got it now. Okay, is this
You've got
okay?
it.
Yeah.
There you
Fine,
go.
yes.
Great. All right then. Okay, so after accepting Aileen's invitation to talk today about towers in Jerusalem, I decided to focus on the aesthetic and public impacts of the towers going up all around us, 500 approximately at the moment, and then discuss what's going on, the legal aspects, the planning aspects, and then highlight two current radical projects which are important for the city as a whole. And of course, the towers, there's so many aspects of the towers that need to be discussed, but it can't all be done in one go. So I'm probably preaching to the choir, as I know I'm teaching to the choir, but I hope you come away with even more motivation to share items on media, to go to this demonstration, which I didn't know was happening this evening against the towers, and to object to specific plans where it's relevant. So let's get into the subject. 200 years ago, almost, in 1832, Victor Hugo, the French author and publicist, wrote an essay entitled War and Demolishers, in which he lamented the destruction of organic medieval Paris in favor of urban renewal being Haussmann's Paris as we know it today. And he referred to the collusion between public officials and speculators, a subject to which I'll refer later. And he also wrote, every day some old memory of France disappears together with the stone on which it was written. A few years ago, similarly, Francesco Ciravo, an Italian conservation architect, wrote, the physical heritage preserves collective memory. It tells a story no less than the orally transmitted narrative, the written history, the local customs, and so on. It illustrates history and brings it to life. It distinguishes the residents of one place from those of other places. It ties a particular community to a place, expresses and preserves historical continuity. And elsewhere, he writes, the bond between a community and its place builds resilience and sustainability. International conventions and charters explain how to achieve the conservation of historic cities and integrate it with a modern and growing city. And I chose just to, out of all the charters and so on which relate to this, to refer to the Valletta Principles from 2011 about safeguarding and managing historic towns and so on and so on. And it refers to various principles, and among them is the setting, which I would call like the backdrop in a theatre, the background on which one sees, for example, historical monuments. It talks about the spirit of place, tangible and intangible, physical and spiritual elements that give an area its specific identity. What makes Jerusalem Jerusalem? And by the way, Professor Avner de Chalit wrote a book called The Spirit of Cities, in which a chapter is devoted to Jerusalem, very also arguing about the spirit of different cities. More in the direction of recommendations, it recommends a buffer zone, for example, as we have around the old city. Can't build high buildings, tall buildings within 75 meters, 150 meters. There are various grades of proximity to the old city walls. And this is, again, although it was already from Ronald Storr's time, in the beginning of the British Mandate, it's included in universal principles of conservation of historic cities. The Washington Charter states, for example, that, sorry, I'm hiding it from myself here, introduction of contemporary and architectural elements must respect the values of the site and its setting. In other words, you can build modern buildings, you can build tall buildings and so on. You can layer upon layer of a city. It's not meant to, it's not meant to be frozen in the past. It's meant to be a living city. But modern architecture should respect what came before. Respect the values of the site of its cities, it says here, and talks about coherence or integrity. Every historic area and its surroundings should be considered in their totality as a coherent whole. And I'll show this later on. However, before we look at what's happening in Jerusalem, I'm going to take a couple of minutes and zoom out to London. And the reason I'm doing this is because in London, in the city of London, every possible mistake has been made, and we should be able to learn from the mistakes made in other places. So what we see here on the left is St. Paul's Cathedral, for centuries the highest spire in London. And the development plan of the City of London left viewing corridors, and it was not meant to, buildings were not meant to obstruct the view to St. Paul's. So here we have what's known as the cheese grater, which you can't see this as cheese grater. You can see it from the front that it's a cheese grater, but it distances itself from the dome of St. Paul's. On the other hand, we have this, the walkie-talkie. And in between the viewing corridors, which are left by regulation, every possible space in the wedges in between the viewing corridors was filled up by towers. Now, a couple more pictures. If you walk in the historic narrow roads in the historic center of London, and you have this looming up above you, you can't even see the sky. It's broad as well as high, this particular building. And just think about walking in Nachla Ort or Zichron Tuvia or Zichron whatever, and what it would feel like having a tower like this looming over you. And the other is what I showed you on the Valletta Principles, the backdrop, the setting, a Naval College of Greenwich, a Baroque building, and the docklands behind it, just east of the city of London. And one more, which I just couldn't resist putting this in. Ike Eger, an architect and architectural critic, took an architectural tour along the Thames. And one of the tourists asked him, who does that little castle belong to? And that little castle, if you don't recognize it, is the Tower of London, which comes all the way down to the river, totally dwarfed by the size. There's skyscrapers, the tall towers adjacent to it. I'm going to skip Ronald Storrs for the time being, and also pause the share, I think. I can find how to do it. So I want to zoom into Jerusalem now. Jerusalem 2000 was meant to be the city's first statutory master plan. In other words, a legally binding master plan for the city. The first since 1959, that is. And well overdue. And Naomi can probably tell you more about this than I can. But the Jerusalem 2000 plan designated business and commercial centers in which it allowed for up to 24 stories. It introduced the concept of, in the planning context, of the historic city, which was everything that was built before 1948, and of course the old city, Mount of Olives in that area, which had already been protected by stores. Its preparation included unusually meaningful public participation, including a voluntary working group led by Professor Ariel Hirschfeld, which included, if I'm not mistaken, cultural figures or intellectuals like himself, as well as architects and planners. And this group recommended parameters for preserving the historic city. And Hirschfeld, for example, compared the scenes, the vistas of Jerusalem to a box at the opera. The setting, the backdrop, as I said, of the historical city and the hills around it, the open areas, then become Atzleva, and so on and so forth, and their meaning in the context of the whole urban fabric. However, the Jerusalem 2000 plan did embed a lot of loopholes. Its provisions excluded neighborhoods for urban renewal and urban renewal projects outside of those neighborhoods and various other exceptions. And in essence, it allowed the district planning committee almost total discretion. And in regard to historic Jerusalem, it says, I'm citing here, the plan leaves the planning authorities with greater flexibility regarding the historic city and the historic neighborhoods, based, and here I'm stressing, based on the assumption that any construction approved in these areas will conform to the neighborhood's established scale and preserve both the built and the natural heritage of the city. So I wonder whether this optimism was justified. We'll talk about this. Now, the plan did provide that detailed statutory plans be prepared for sensitive areas, but this has rarely happened. And most importantly, as Naomi said before, it was never deposited, never became a legally binding document, a statutory document. And since then, almost only non-statutory neighborhood plans, which are Tochniot Av or planning policy documents, have been approved, bypassing the legal procedure and the protections of the legal procedure, and with varying levels of public participation, some more and some less. Unfortunately, the case law has repeatedly allowed these non-statutory plans, but it has said that deviation from them, once they are approved, should be the exception and not the rule, and that deviation should be justified. However, in practice, the committees often rely on weak post ex facto justifications, like claiming that a proposal offers a significant contribution to the public realm, a park, public pathway, kindergartens or whatever, but it remains, the significant contribution remains vague and unquantifiable and varies very much from case to case. Now, about this being non-statutory, despite repeated Supreme Court statements on the value of public participation for improving plans because of the assimilation of public knowledge, of local knowledge into the plans, and for democratic legitimacy and to increase transparency, and I would say in brackets to avoid corruption thereby, public participation is often reduced to lip service and the public's comments are rejected. And most importantly, maybe there's no appeal once the policy of a neighborhood plan, for example, has been approved by the regional planning committee. There's no way to appeal it, or any public policy document like the light rail policy, which we'll come to soon. However, I think that the neighborhood plans, even if they're not binding, do have or did have importance because they saw the neighborhood as a whole. They regulated or hope to regulate the siting of various functions. They often limited tall buildings in some places while encouraging densification in other parts of the neighborhood. For example, encouraging mid-rise urban renewal. But unfortunately, the ink was hardly dry on most of these neighborhood plans before the deviation from them became the norm. But even so, there was worse to come. And I'm talking, of course, about the light rail policy documents, the policy for intensifying the building along the routes of the light rail. In 2016 and 2019, they were approved. These documents basically overrode the Jerusalem 2000 plan and redefined the
Excuse me, Chaviva, one moment. Did you want to move your slides on, or are you staying on this slide?
Oh, I do want to move them on, but I haven't got to this in a minute. Okay, I'll get to here in a minute.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure it's not
No, I
stuck or
haven't got
something.
it. Thank you. Okay. All right. So you know what, I'll switch. Okay. Okay, so the light policy basically overrides the Jerusalem 2000, and the reasoning behind it was to encourage urban renewal, large-scale urban renewal, and create thousands of housing units for residents who would supposedly be able to rely solely on public transport and not their own cars. Now, while the 2016 policy still gave some precedence to the neighborhood plans, the 2019 policy did not. It enabled towers of up to 30 floors on plots over 1.5 dunams. 4 dunams is a hectare, so work that out. An acre, sorry. And ridges in particular. And it cancelled the 2016 protections for historic corridors like Jaffa Street, Rehovot Yaffa, or King George Street, which are sensitive and which others can see a lot of 19th century buildings, mandate buildings, and so on. So where does this policy lead Jerusalem today? With the 500 towers going up around. So as I say, we're going to look at just a couple of examples from here and there. So the Etz Chaim Yeshiva, built in 1844, inaugurated, I think, in 1850 or so. This is the building, and this is wonderful gate. And look at the details here. And so
we can't see it. You're not sharing.
Okay, so resume. Great, thank you. So if you look at the Etz Chaim building, the yeshiva building, look at the gate, look at the detail here, look at the arch, the secondary gate next to it, and so on. And a project plan for it, in which the building is basically swallowed up in the towers. You can see how the towers, there's no buffer zone or anything like that. You can't even place this as far as the directions are concerned. It totally overwhelms the historic buildings along and behind Rehovot Yaffa. And I think we're seeing something that, reminds me at least of the pictures I showed you of London. Another one, similar case, also along Rehovot Yaffa, the Shaarei Tzedek, the old Shaarei Tzedek hospital compound, and what is going to be, or is being built, in fact, instead of it, probably saving here the facade, but the interior is also spectacular. Maybe the whole building is going to be saved.
The building is saved.
Okay.
The building is saved, but putting those monstrosities behind it becomes a crime.
Of course it is. Of course, just look at the scale. I chose both pictures. I couldn't decide. This one from above, just it shows how totally out of scale it is. Now the city engineer says Yoel Levin said we haven't touched the historic city. He says this again and again. Nachla Art, places like this, we haven't touched it. Part of it are protected by the regional district master plan, but the result will still be like the pictures we see here and the pictures I showed you of London, where the new buildings overshadow, overwhelm, dwarf the original buildings, and certainly you lose the historic character of the neighborhood, or the complex of buildings and so on. But I want to look out. I will return to the center of town because we're going to discuss the Hasbun project. But I would like to look very briefly at a couple of projects outside the city, outside the center of the city. Rehov Bar Yochai were approved a few years ago, probably about 4 years ago. This was the neighborhood plan. It allowed for mid-rise urban renewal of 8 to 14 floors along both sides of Rehov Bar Yochai, which is this, and it left the Park El Meliach, which is an important park for the neighborhood, intact. However, this is the plan that was approved. We got up to 32 and 36 floors. It annexed part of the park. I couldn't find a justification for this. The committee said the open space will be returned in other places in the neighborhood, but it could be fragmented there. It won't be as functional a park as Park El Meliach. And look at what happens on the other side of the road. What you can see here is behind the towers is the buildings on the other side of the road. Of course, it's a visualization. When they want to build, if they want to do projects of urban renewal, they won't be able to build buildings like these because there's no infrastructure for it, no carrying capacity. But the committee has said, the chairmen of the people of the committee have repeatedly said at the time that this was approved as well, first come or takes all, basically. Or if they want to let them present a project and we'll discuss it. But having said that the infrastructure can't support more towers like this, it doesn't mean that the committee won't approve it. Another place I want to look at outside the city is Kiryat Yovel, the Borachov Towers, the Kellner project, Rehov Brazil. And these are important because they're on the interface between the Harei Yerushalayim, the Jerusalem Hills, the open space outside the city, the Ein Karim Valley, and the built-up part of the built-up city. Now, regarding Kellner, this is a visualization. It's not the towers that exist. This is what exists, and the committee said these are also an eyesore, which is true, but it doesn't justify towers. And the Borachov towers are apparently part of the justification for building the Epstein Tower, which I'm going to come to in a minute or so, because they're also about 40, nearly 40 floors. I don't remember exactly. An unusual case where the appeals committee instructed the developers that they have to halve the height of the towers from 30 floors to 15 floors. That's Somet Ora, the Ora Junction, and the towers are part of the Reches Levan project. We're looking at them, of course, from Ein Karem and seeing the impact on the view. That was the committee's decision, the appeals committee decision. As I say, highly unusual. Now, all right, that was just presented to the committee in regard to the 2019 update of the light rail policy. But I'm pausing share at the moment. What I want to discuss for a minute where we are now, what this system or non-system of development plans, of non-statutory development plans, of planning policy documents is where it's brought us to. I see it, I think a lot of us see it as developer biased, as chaotic, totally discretionary, non-transparent system. And the towers are advanced in like a piecemeal, cumulative manner and largely unexamined without looking at the broader planning context, contrary to the basic principles of urban conservation and urban planning, which of course requires planning institutions to look at the wider context of a neighborhood, of the city and so on, of what's going up opposite, what's going up next door and so on and so forth, across the road, like in the Bar Yochai case. Of course, it causes uncertainty and it also infringes upon personal property rights, which is a topic in itself, which I won't go into now. Personally, I don't see any way that this can ensure, this method or non-method can ensure the city's future for not only attracting tourists and pilgrims, but also ensuring a fair quality of life for its residents. In Tel Aviv, for example, there's checks and balances, and none of those apply here. The mayor has said, and I have this on record, he thinks Jerusalem can look like Hong Kong, and I deleted the slide about the fire. That's another subject. And he said, and this is what I have on record, that when developers tell him they want to build 20 floors, he said, why 20? Why not build 40? And I listened to this 3 times to make sure I got it right. The head of the Planning Bureau has said it doesn't matter if we build 20 or 50 floors because people walk around with their heads down on their phones like this. And Shira Talmi, the chair of the district or regional planning committee, well, she's evaluated by her superiors by the number of dwellings that the committees approve. And possibly she really does love these tall towers because she keeps referring to tall and slender towers. In fact, here in Ramot, instead of Mitzpe Naftoach, she wanted to build a tall and slender tower instead of a whole neighborhood. That's instead of the checks and balances that are necessary to protect a range of public interests, we're seeing symbiosis between the municipal planning committee, the mayor, the district planning, regional, basically, it's called district in English, but it's regional, regional planning bureau, which assists development and promotes development, and the planning committee, which is actually a quasi-judicial body which holds inquiries and decides upon plans after hearing the developers and the objectors. Now, we activists keep getting told, well, it's either building up or out. So if you want to save the green space around Jerusalem, we have to build up. But building 50-story towers is not the only way to prevent urban sprawl and to bring about the densification of the city. Activists always show pictures of Paris or Barcelona, but London too. It's been researched and found that the densest neighborhoods are not those with the towers, but those with mid-rise apartments. And in Israel, one example of this is the LaGuardia.
Hi, dear.
Is a project on Rehov LaGuardia. And I rather think I deleted the slide, actually. I think I didn't have time. And instead of Binyanei Rekevet, the terrace blocks like we see in so many places, there are mid-rise buildings, one tower of about 20 floors, but all the rest are like 6 floors. And he's shown, Professor Guggenheim, who planned it, has shown how it achieves good density, not less than towers, than the option of towers for the same place. And this can be adapted to Jerusalem's topography, mid-rise, and even in some places allowing for 3 exposures.
Birds.
Another reason why the planners say they can't do mid-rise
They're
here.
birds. They're all right. Sorry.
Just a moment. I'm
You
going
didn't hear
to
me.
Mute somebody.
I'm going to try. Don't know how to do it now. Mute everybody. I'll mute everybody and then you unmute yourself. But I just can't find how to do it here. Just a moment. Participants. Okay. Mute all.
Mute themselves.
Muted everybody. Chaviva, you unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Chaviva, you're on mute with everybody, so that's right.
Okay, I've got it. All right. All right, what I was saying is that in Tel Aviv, they've achieved a good density on the LaGuardia project without going into towers, and this can be adapted to Jerusalem as well, and even allowing 3 exposures possibly in some places. And another thing I wanted to comment is that during the Mandate years, famous architects like Kaufman and Mendelssohn adapted international Bauhaus principles to Tel Aviv and to Jerusalem. They were both fast-growing cities now, and they managed to do it with quality and keeping principles of urban conservation and urban planning. Okay. And before we go back, and having talked about top down and rejecting the public's comments and so forth, I would like to again cite Francesco Sarajevo, who says the lesson from Pratik Geddes, who planned the master plan for Tel Aviv in 1925, though Sirava wasn't referring specifically to that. Planning must be based on thorough appreciation of the existing context. It cannot be left to the casual dynamics of market forces or improvisations of high-profile architects. Star architects, what we call today. And Geddes also supported the involvement of residents in fundamental choices regarding their cities and countryside, like the Bet HaMishpat Elyon, like Bagatz has said. People have a right to participate in decision-making around the surroundings that design their surroundings for generations to come. And again, Geddes already in 1925 and so warned against the dangers of top-down planning. It has to be with public participation. It has to be, it can't be left to developers, the same as even Victor Hugo says in 1832, the collusion between the city officials and the speculators. Now, I said I would like to address, said in the beginning, I'd like to address two current issues. One of them is the Epstein Tower, and the other is Hasbon. So last week, the appeals committee, as you probably saw, all of you dismissed the appeal against this tower right by Har Herzl. You can see here the Calder. Don't know what to call it, artwork. It's not a sculpture.
Stable.
This was planned by a star architect, Adrian Smith. And now, originally 200 meters above Sderot Herzl, more above the Ein Kerem Road, which is this side of it. It was reduced. The city engineer Yoel Evan says, but yes, but we reduced the height by nearly 30 meters, but it's still 170 meters high. 42, it says 42 floors, but the floors have got to be very high because I did the math, and it's more than 42, or very high floors, double floors or so on with the gallery. But anyway, it's 50 together with the 8 on the side of Ein Kerem. If you look from Ein Kerem, it's going to be 50 stories. Obviously, it'll tower over Mount Herzl, over Yad Vashem, over the Ein Kerem Valley. It'll be, as they say, a landmark seen from way beyond Jerusalem and across the city. Now, the planning committee, the regional district planning committee, always thinks it has to give maximum building rights along the Rakevet Kala. That was the justification. The appeals committee surveyed the hierarchy of plans from national master plans right down to the local plans, which aren't legally binding, of course, and concluding that there's nothing in any of the regulations in order to prevent it from approving this tower. It says, well, look, you can see that regarding the old city, there are limitations, and since here there are none, so we can deduce that we can build a tower like this here. It was intentional not to make any regulations around Har Herzl. I mean, if it's not a building that's right opposite the gates of Mount Herzl or the military cemetery, then it's allowed. That was basically what one said. One could ask the question, just supposing there wasn't a limitation in any local plan regarding the old city, would they have put a tower like this next to the Kotel? Because as the objectors argued, this is no less holy a site than the old city. But I'll probably be stoned out of town for saying this. I'm not sure that the committee was completely wrong, because it looked at alternatives like 2 towers or 4 towers even at some stage, and it decided that 1 tall tower leaves more place for a public plaza. It obstructs the view less of the Ein Kerem area. There's less shadowing and there's less wind tunnels and a list of other reasons, and decided that this was the better plan. They asked themselves, is ordinary better than special, in order not to detract from the importance of Har Herzl? And they decided that spectacular is better than ordinary. The minority opinion was phrased in very harsh language, and concluded by saying it couldn't find a single justification for this tower. I don't know what the answer is, but I can't avoid thinking, apart from the sensitivity of Har Herzl and the bereaved parents and so on and so forth. I don't, I can't help thinking, going back to the slide I showed you, who does that little castle belong to? That it does totally dwarf Yad Vashem and Har Herzl, but on the other hand, from this point, they don't have architectural significance from this particular point. I do think the site was suitable. It had been zoned for building, which was like the point from which the whole discussion originated, that it had previously been zoned for building residential building. So instead of rezone, I think it should have been rezoned for a public building. That was what should have been built in this particular site, but it didn't happen. I want to go now to Hasbon. Am I still okay for time?
I think we need to leave a bit of time for questions
so I'll
and
do this
comments,
quickly.
and I would like to put in the input of the Sustainable Jerusalem Coalition.
Okay, then I've just another couple of minutes. I'll do this really fast then. I'll cut out of it. What we see here on the left is the old Knesset building, now the Knesset Museum. The corner, I think it's Rehov Ma'alot. Look at the curved building line. Look how it's an integral whole, curve on this side, the curve on this side. You can see the street in harmony, each side of it in harmony with the other. Look at the details here of the corner of Rehov Hillel and King George, the details here, the arched windows, the detail above the door, and so on and so forth. This is mandatory building in Jerusalem at its best, I think. And behind the facade of King George and Rehov Hillel, we have the Hasbon buildings, 19th century buildings, a cigarette factory, a school, various other buildings. This is a water cistern here of architectural importance in itself, I think. Look at this. And all these things are important and they're registered for conservation. However, the Hasbon plan, again, basically 50 towers, even if it's written 48 with the 2 technical floors, it comes to 50. It as its justification is along the light rail because it's on King George. It doesn't destroy the buildings for conservation, but look what it does here. The same as the cheese grate has distanced itself from the dome of St. Paul's. So here, the bottom of the building, the base is allowing space, as it were, for the historic building, but it's building on air rights. It's basically leaning over the historical buildings, and the other buildings are doing the same, more or less. It's taking land again from a park, from a public park, Gan Hatzmaut, Gan Sherman, which is part of Gan Hatzmaut, the only big park in the center of the city. It says it's returning the public space, but here's the public space. It's paved. It's a commercial space. Even if there are trees and something here and there, it's not park. It's not a park at all. Now, the plan is on the east side of King George, of course, which was previously by the 2016 light rail policy plan. It was protected. It was one was only meant to build up to 10 stories on that side of the road. It also, I said, it takes away from the park. It also uproots an olive grove, an ancient olive grove, and of course, lots and lots of trees. And as you see, it's totally out of scale, and it will cast huge shadows several hours a day in winter over the park and over other stretches of the city. And moreover, planning guidelines say that if you increase the number of residents, you have to make sure that there is open space. The guidelines say how many meters per resident. And here, if these are occupied, it's detracting. Not only is it not adding open space for each resident, it's detracting from the existing open space, of course. I can't see any justification anywhere for annexing public land to private public parkland, in particular to private projects. By the way, the Conservation Committee in the area unanimously rejected the project, which is extremely rare. But again, if there's a star architect, this time it's MVRDV, the Dutch company. It seems it blinds the eyes of the planning institutions to any and every disadvantage of a plan. Now, I would like to end with just one just citing an article from the magazine Design, an internet magazine on architecture and urban design, with what the Prime Minister of Albania, again zooming out, previously the mayor of Tirana, which is the non-historic capital of Albania, he said to architects like MRVRDV and Adrian Smith and others like them, he said, when it comes to the identity, we try to tell them we want buildings that are related to the intelligence of the territory, he said. I saw the building and I said to the architect, listen, it's a beautiful building, but it can't be built here. It should be built in Dubai. He said, come and talk to the mountain, listen to the river, try to understand what the earth is whispering to you. Look at the trees, look at the people, and then let's see what will happen. This is the spirit. And I think that's the attitude that we would like our planning institutions to adopt. So that's it for now. Thank you very much. And
Thank you so much.
Stop
Can you
share.
stop share, Chaviva? I must add a few words, if I may be allowed to. First of all, thank you so much. So much information and so graciously presented. But I'd like to share with you all what we, the Jerusalem Green Fund, are doing about this, because I saw that Nancy asked it in the chat. So the thing is, I think the two main points that we are relating to, first of all, this issue of the lack of a statutory plan for the city. We're claiming there should be such a plan. And now when we discover that in many neighborhoods, what has happened is that the master plans that are not statutory and not binding are being disregarded by the planning authorities, and they're springing up, towers are springing up all over the place. And 3 or 4 neighborhoods who are members and organizations that are members of our Sustainable Jerusalem lobby have brought this information to the knowledge of the 100 organizations that are members, and have asked, for instance, tomorrow there is a case in court, and I will be speaking on behalf of the Sustainable Jerusalem Coalition at the request of a small non-profit organization working in Kiryat Yovel. Now, the community center, which itself is a member of the coalition, felt unable to sue the municipality because it feels dependent on it for its staff and funding and things like that. But we're free to act. We're free agents. And so is the Sustainable Jerusalem lobby. So I will be making that claim and putting the arguments forward that one of the main problems being that you can count housing units until tomorrow, but you have to make sure in a poor city like Jerusalem that you're building quality of life and not just towers. You're building and you're providing the community services, the open space that people need, the educational institutions and the cultural centers that they need, so that young, productive couples where both parents are working and can contribute to the economy of the city want to come and live in Jerusalem. And that's the great challenge for the city. And we feel that we may be in trouble here because many of us, Hillary, Chaviva, myself, we were involved 20 years back in this enormous fight to prevent building in the Jerusalem hills, and we won the battle. And the battle demanded that the city build in. And if the city builds in, it maintains, as Chaviva pointed out, it has to build up. But if it builds up, it could be disastrous. So we could be shooting ourselves in the leg. We have to densify our city in a sustainable way. That's why having a voice of 100 organizations together, sometimes, not always, has impact. Now, just yesterday, I was called by Deputy Mayor Yossi Chavillo. He asked us to go with him to the objection to the Burj Khalifa, that terrible tower on Har Herzl, and we went and spoke. We spoke well, but our objection was rejected. He now wants to go to court on this. And he says, can he be backed by the Sustainable Jerusalem Coalition? He'll be coming to our meeting next Sunday to ask permission of all the 100 organizations. Can he be backed by them? And can he do his crowdfunding for the whole campaign through the Jerusalem Green Fund? So we're in this deep, although you could say that basically the Jerusalem Green Fund is not deeply involved in fighting high-rise buildings, but we're deeply involved in the affairs of the whole of our Sustainable Jerusalem lobby. And we have to use that pressure to try and create a swell of public opinion. It's not easy, and we don't always succeed, and we need more and more people to join us as stakeholders, more and more organizations. We're building an army. And this army is the chance for Jerusalem to listen to people like Chaviva when the next elections come round and before it's too late. We don't want to destroy our city because Jerusalem is too dear to all of us. I've said enough.
I think the answer is that one can build up, but it doesn't have to be 50 stories. And as I said, mid-rise has been found to be quite effective as well. And you know, they've been manipulating a housing crisis for their purposes. And as we know now, there are so many apartments built and on the shelf across in various places in the country. I don't know how much in Jerusalem. But Professor Feitelson has said it many times and in many objections to various plans that they're planning and approving far too many plans, and these buildings won't be built, or if they're built, they won't be sold.
Let's take a few questions. Eileen.
Yeah, I have a question. Is there any research, any studies that are talking about the number of residents and how much already in towers anywhere in the world and how much they actually use public transportation? Because what we want is, yes, the towers, but not huge towers along the public transportation and the light rail lines. And that's what I remember when we were fighting in Ramallah, that we thought if they put the towers in towards the end of the streets that Chaviva and Hillary and I live on, was going to bring another 4,000 residents, I think it was, with cars into our neighborhood. So my question then is are there any statistics that say you're going to build 50 towers and let's say 500 towers and 400,000 residents, and are they going to all bring in their private cars? You know, how much percentage of the potential residents use public transportation?
I don't know the answer to that.
I have information.
Good.
I have some information.
You do?
I have information of the public transport master plan team who have said that the number of towers planned in Yuvalim and Ganim, which have already approved another 12,000 housing units, whereas the original master plan recommended 7,500. And they say that the light rail will not be able to serve all these people. And they're going to have to expand the public transport plan or cut down on some of the towers because they've just been planting towers and not thinking of all the needs of the population, transport, education, everything. So we're in for a lot of trouble, and it's our public duty to help them wake up sooner rather than later.
I want to surmise that the people who live in towers like the Epstein Tower will not be coming out of their luxury duplex apartments or triplex apartments and getting onto the light rail or standing in queue to get on a crowded Egged bus. I rather think that we will be using their own cars, but that's just a guess.
Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Hillary.
Comment. Thanks, Chaviva, as usual, very interesting and enlightening. A couple of things that I wanted to say is that Chaviva spoke mainly about the physical aspect of the towers and didn't address a very crucial, in my opinion, aspect, and we need to think about that, is the social alienation.
Absolutely.
that these buildings will cause, and we already see it. I have in-laws that live in a tower, and she has no idea even who lives on her floor. So the social alienation is a major issue. I'm also concerned that in the center of the city, we already have lots of chutznikim, people from outside, who are investing in property. And so what's going to happen? A lot of these are going to be ghost buildings, I don't know what you call them, where they're owned by people who only come a couple of times a year, and so that could be a problem. But one thing that possibly is a good thing. Definitely not 50, the mid-rise, yes, is where they are talking about encouraging office space and, work environment in the towers as well. I don't know what the plans actually look like, whether they encourage that or not, because then that would keep people from using their cars to get to wherever they need to get for work. So that's what I have to say.
I think if part of them are for business, commercial uses and so on, it certainly it'll contribute to scattering occupations around the city, industry, occupation, whatever, around the city. And this is one of the arguments. This is one of the arguments that will come up tomorrow, for example, in court, is that the committee hasn't looked at whether there's enough space. The guidelines say 100,000 meters for Ta'asuka, and it's not there in any of the plans or something like that. That's one issue. I don't know what happens to all these ghost buildings. I don't know how they can be upkept. I know that across in the UK, for example, several towns like holiday coastal towns have in their local plans decided that to limit the possibility of buying second homes, holiday homes in their towns, because it's harmful for the city, for the economy, for keeping schools and educational frameworks functioning well, and so on and so forth. And on the one hand, these properties, it doesn't solve the problem if they're saying we have to plan Jerusalem for 1.5 million residents, which is what they're saying at the moment. And that's something which has never been publicly discussed. Why do we have to allow do we need Jerusalem to grow without any limits? Should it grow until it reaches Tel Aviv or Bet Shemesh or whatever? But if they're saying they need to plan for 1.5 million people, well, one needs to check this constantly to see if it's correct, and plan accordingly. And this isn't planned. The towers aren't planning accordingly. Nobody will be able to. A few Jerusalemites will be able to afford them. Let's put it that way. Gentrification, what's called gentrification, but also, as you say, social destruction of communities, destroying communities, social alienation, that sort of thing. All these things haven't really been discussed.
By the way, apropos gentrification, a lot of the justification for the development of an urban renewal project is that there is a slum there and it needs to be pulled down, and they're going to be improving the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But if they build up to 50 stories and the people living there can't afford to pay the upkeep of the building, then we may be replacing yesterday's slums with tomorrow's slums. And that's my worst nightmare. I think we all have to think about that.
Absolutely. And both Professor Nurit Al-Fassi and Professor Feitelson and others as well say there's no way that these projects will be able to be renewed once, say, in another 50, 100 years even. You can't, there are machines, they can't be destroyed and rebuilt. It's not like the projects that they are replacing, not like the buildings that they are replacing at present. You can't vacate thousands of residents in order to destroy and rebuild a 50-story tower. Yes, we might be creating. And by the way, the Grenfell, I took out the slide about the Grenfell fire in 2017 in the UK, which is a council building, in other words, cheap housing for residents who needed public assistance. Welfare housing, it's called it. I don't know what the current politically correct term is, but it was badly maintained. The sprinklers weren't working, the fire doors weren't working, all sorts of things. If they say Professor Alterman says this building like this is a machine, well, apart from water pumps and a generator to back up electricity for the lifts and so on and so forth, apart from that, it has a load of other mechanisms to upkeep it, like pumps that draw out smoke in case of fire, and that sort of all sorts of mechanisms and machines and things that keep it functioning. And in the Grenfell Tower, these weren't maintained at all, and the result was a disaster, like we saw last week in the Hong Kong towers. Yeah, it's liable to happen, absolutely.
Can I also add?
Yeah,
Whenever-
Shoshana, please. And
whenever-
let's maybe have Shoshana have the last question, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Okay. I know living near New York City, going into the city, any little wind creates a lot of wind tunnels. And
Yeah.
I have seen older people actually being swept and dropped on the cement from it because they're so big, the towers.
That's amazing. I'm really pleased pleased you say that. I mean, I'm not pleased you're saying that. Gadi Iran, architect Gadi Iran, has objected to the Husband project, the one I just showed you on King George Street. And one of his things he writes there is about this, that the wind corridors can actually be endanger passers-by, pedestrians. And I didn't realize that it could. I couldn't imagine it could be that bad that you could see people really blown away or blown over. But
So yeah. This,
yeah.
by the way, came up in Beit HaKerem because around my son and all of their neighborhood, they are doing Pinui Vebinui, and one of the city engineers came out and talked to them about the wind tunnels that are going to happen once they build the high-rise buildings. And it's all young families and young kids, and they have a gorgeous park, and no one will be able to go into the park even. They're not going to take the park away, but the wind tunnels are going to be so bad because it's so badly planned that the kids won't even be able to go out to the parks.
Wow.
Right in Beit HaKerem.
Yeah.
I live opposite a very tall tower, which I have to pass on my way to the light rail. And the tower is actually not an ugly one. And it's not 50 stories, it's 30 stories. And it's on the light rail route. But when there were heavy winds last winter, and I went with my agala that I take to the shuk for all my shopping, I held onto the rail and this big metal agala flew up in the air.
Ooh, wow.
I had that experience myself.
Yes, I don't think we many of us have never. I mean, we know what a wind tunnel is, but to that extent, we haven't seen it, and it's scary. I think it's scary, and I don't think the committees actually understand. Have imagined scenes like you just described. Was it Shoshana or Nancy? I'm sorry, I don't remember who said it just now. And it's really important to point that out. There's so much more to say about towers, but
Thank you, Chaviva.
yeah, we need to be on the ball. And by the way, one can still submit an objection to the Husband towers until the weekend, until Friday, I think. They were signing. They were lawyers stamping people's objections this afternoon. And I don't know where they can be signed now. But anybody who does have the possibility, there is a public one going around on the WhatsApp groups, which one only needs to sign and have stamped.
I just went to the
One quick question, Nomi. Yossi said he wants to do crowdfunding for the Khalifa Tower.
He needs 50,000 shekels to pay the lawyer to appeal the Burj Khalifa case. And he wants to do crowdfunding through us, and I've told him he can, if he wants to.
But we're going to get into that, I think, on Sunday instead of now. So come on Sunday.
Just that people should know that if they want to help, that they can do the crowdfunding.
If we all approve it, then I'm sure we'll get the word out there appropriately. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, because this Zoom will be forwarded to a lot of groups that weren't represented tonight that didn't. So yeah, so maybe I'll wait till Sunday to send it to all those groups.
Okay. So I'm going to wrap that up.
Chaviva, toda rabah.
Okay,
Wow.
Thank you to Chaviva. Spectacular.
Bye.
I'll close and say that we hope we have a lower future than a higher future, if you catch me. It should be bright and less windy and lower in height. Please God, with everybody's support here and in other forums and continuing to work together. So let's be in touch. I'll send out this recording, maybe a sikum, a summary, and how to get involved to everybody's emails, which I have everybody's emails here, so we're good. And that's it. Thank you. Be in touch.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Naomi, you can stop the recording.
Oh, yes, of course I should. Just a minute. How do I do that? Just a second. I have to stop the recording. Pause. Stop.
Thank you.